1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay, next one up is existing building regulations. Introduce yourself, your group, and then go for it.
Hi, Adam from Curry & Brown. We were looking at existing regulations, and I think we can probably summarise it with, we agree with Ed's group. Exactly the same things, starting with an audit of buildings perhaps over a certain size threshold, and identifying improvements, and where determined appropriate, those improvements are mandatory. So there's less of a cost effectiveness of viability test where there are things that are known to be desirable. Probably the most important one, disclosure of energy information, so that we can learn and share information, and importantly occupiers can see what the performance of the building might be before they occupy it. Enforced minimum operational standards. We have minimum asset ratings now in the UK, and something that actually addresses real operational performance would be a really good balance to that. And then funding both for delivery, low-cost finance for delivery, and then funding for good enforcement, so that whatever we actually choose to do happens and is delivered in practice. That's it.
Awesome. Okay. All right, Robert, introduce yourself, your group, and then go for 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's Robert Cohen, work for Energy Consultants, Verco, and we were looking at the incentives needed to get energy efficiency in new buildings. And our first point is that the users or consumers of these new buildings have to want energy efficiency. That is the key thing to get to happen. And in order for that to happen, it has to be real. So we're not talking here about EPCs, energy performance certificates, because they don't tell you what the real performance is. And in order for reality to strike home, we need transparency about energy efficiency. And in order to get transparency, as I think at least 2 other people have said, we need disclosure. And disclosure will drive reputation. Reputation will drive value. When I say value, I mean asset value, and that will incentivize the developers of new buildings. Now, there's clearly big differences between the non-domestic and residential markets. We think that for the non-domestic market, the users will actually pay more rent for an energy efficient building because it's a better building. It's going to be better designed, better constructed, better commissioned, and particularly better maintained and operated. And that will produce a building which provides better conditions for the workforce. They will get this much sought after improvement in well-being and productivity, and you get a virtuous circle from the occupants liking the building and the developer having a more valuable asset. For the residential, which is a bigger challenge, I think, we need to incentivize the consumers by having moderated council tax, so you pay less if you've got a more efficient building. And also we have to make the energy suppliers have reverse tariffs. So you tackle fuel poverty by providing the minimum amount of energy at a low cost, and then if you start using excessive amounts of energy, you get charged more for every kilowatt hour that you use.
Chris Twin, we were looking at, on table 1, at new buildings and the regulation side. Given the fact that regulations are defined by central government, not GLA, however, the precedent is set with the GLA asking for 35% better than Part L, for example, for many buildings. So what we're looking at is things the GLA could potentially overlay. First priority is back to the same theme of closing the gap on monitoring. In new build, there is already regulations for meters. There's already regulations for standards of output and BMS. It goes into most buildings, but there is not a pro forma or a protocol as to what data must come out when and how, so that these guys can then actually use it. that should be in the new build regulations. It should also cover the construction process to make sure you're monitoring that the building is actually providing those as part of it, as a spin-off. The idea of minimum fabric standards, once again, is already in building regulations, but there's the opportunity for the GLA to ask for enhanced values. Because at the moment, those glass towers are blowing into, it is pulling the building regulations and the GLA's attempts to be ahead of the game into disrepute. We ought to have minimum standards applied which are London specific. Then the idea of incentives. The fact that a lot of developers ignore or choose not to consider sustainability issues. How do we align some of the incentives with the end users? One example quoted, most commercial buildings have rent reviews, where there's a whole professional team trying to drive down the rent saying the building isn't performing well. So why not set up that as the incentive for a developer to demonstrate he has put all of these things in place, and therefore he provides them, he has a financial incentive to provide them during the new build. So it's aligning incentives across the divide of end users, developers, landowners, and constructors. Get viable enforcement mechanisms in place. Now, this one creates a certain amount of debate, but the fact is, it's the absence of that which is allowing people to bend the rules. We've got to focus on how we address that one way or another. And then finally, as a final comment went on, zero carbon for non-domestic buildings, because we have it in place at a basic level for housing, but we don't have it yet for non-domestic buildings. And then to take a leaf out of, for example, the UK GBC's publications, how do we then have a route map from regulated energy to include non-regulated, unregulated energy, to embodied energy, to then whole life energy in a route map, an escalator for the next 10 or so years. Thank you.
Table 5, life cycle carbon. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right, introduce yourself, your table, and then give us 3 minutes of relates.
Hi, my name is Olivier Boeneg from Elementa, and we are table 8, and we deal with life cycle carbon. We looked at the different uses of energy, and as buildings become less and less energy intensive in use, the embodied carbon in the building becomes a bigger impact. So therefore, one of the challenges to address this, and the challenges is finding reliable data to evaluate the embodied carbon inside buildings. Most people use the ICE database from Bath University, but it is very academic. So we think the GLA or any body that to which we give the responsibility needs to adopt a policy for to help reduce the life cycle carbon and give design team developers 2 routes to achieve lower life cycle carbons. One through innovation, through research for teams that have higher research capabilities, and another route which is to give people simple rules by which they can evaluate the life cycle carbon of their building based on simpler routes. We think the GLA needs to adopt a data set. It won't be perfect to start with, but a data set and a methodology to evaluate the embodied carbon of buildings. We need to concentrate not on door handles or on paints, but we need to concentrate on the 80-20, the 80% of the building that cause the maximum amount of embodied carbon into the building. We also need planning to encourage flexible buildings, because there is no point having building made out of 80% recycled material if 80% of these buildings are destroyed within 10 years. So we want buildings that are flexible, that can evolve, that can go from an office to a residential, from a residential to an office, and evolve. We identified a barrier in which sometimes councils can be suspicious of developers building flexible buildings because they think they might bring a dwelling through the back door when they don't want to have any more dwelling in that area, or they may want to build a building that can be converted within a couple of years to an office building. So we think planning needs to encourage building that change in use.
And also talk about why you went for this amazing layout here.
No pressure or anything. Dave Barker from Elementor. So our table was looking at resilience, which, like many of these, is quite a broad topic, I guess, and can go many directions. We got bogged down a little bit on overheating, which I think is a huge issue and one probably worthy of getting bogged down on. But I thank Olivier for touching on things like adaptable buildings, because that's another place we could have gone. So 3 main points here. First being user education, so looking at kind of the performance gap of how we design our buildings and how they are used. We think there's a need to provide better building user education on an ongoing basis. So not maybe a booklet that gets thrown out to the first occupants and then thrown into the bin, but something that the second and third generation occupants can continue to learn from. And then empowering users to pursue any building issues, where the building might not perform in the way that it was intended, or the building users not getting everything out of the building that they want to. So those kind of thoughts touch on things like overheating and all these smart design solutions that designers might put into buildings, but then don't actually come into play when our occupants end up in the building. Data and open data is something that's been mentioned a couple of times along here, but the whole idea of measurement and verification of our buildings came out really strongly on the table. Someone had a really cool idea of using a black box, so stealing that idea from the automotive industry, having some sort of incentive for building owners to have their data kind of monitored and dragged out from their building, but in some way incentivize that in the same way as a black box. And then research, institutional or otherwise, into modeling data, and there's been some progress on that lately in terms of TM59 and things like that, but really pushing that into an open data framework rather than maybe a group of experts that are coming up with the way things should be done, perhaps. The third thing here is sticks and carrots, so enforcing action and incentivizing action to get people to focus on future climate. So we've noticed in energy guidance that there's some grey wording in there that says things like, you must consider future climates. But do we need something more concrete to incentivize or enforce people to actually consider it and make it part of what they're doing?
Table 6.
Is table 6? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let her rip.
Hi, my name is Marie-Louise Schembri. Our group, we're dealing with building ecosystems, a very broad range of topics. We were told to discuss transport, land use, landscape, and what else was there?
Social.
And social. So it's we started off with a very simple question. We started with land use, and we eventually came to 2 priorities to do with community and their involvement and their understanding. So in the first instance, I'll start with the second one. We need to get community to understand why they want to buy into the whole sustainability or the whole low carbon idea. So what we're suggesting as a priority is some form of education and feedback. It's a little bit loose because we spoke at length about everything from energy to biodiversity to the rail network and cycling and quite a number of things. But in the first instance, and we spoke mostly about this, is bringing the community in early into the development, and we still haven't resolved this. And how do you bring the community of a new residential development, for example, when there isn't an existing community in place? So we discussed the potential of having some framework that encourages, invites people to, for example, own the energy centre or basically be able to have a say on how profits are spent in their community, whether they're spent on any of the subjects we were covering or anything else actually. So basically set up community groups, some form of registry, framework, charities, etc. Because we felt that one of the barriers at the moment is that energy networks in London is too privatised and there's too much control and commercially driven for communities to be able to appreciate and support the whole idea of low carbon networks. Sorry, it's a bit broad.
That's great. And you were 3 pieces of brilliance here.
Thank you. So we are the Open Table. We didn't have a brief, so we started talking about Pilates for a few minutes, but then we got on to building performance. And I think, almost to sum up, I'm not the last person, but everybody's been talking about building performance as in reality rather than the theoretical policy we have at the moment. So we, without having any agenda, that was the number one on our table. So I think that's quite telling. And to persuade you to give us, to vote for us, I think we've come up with this this platform. I think no one else has, everybody else has said it's a problem. We're actually offering you a real solution. So it's not just a theoretical standard. This is real performance. We are a GIS platform. We've got a number of examples, but the easiest way to performance to describe this is a TripAdvisor for buildings. So it allows users, whether that's an office, a school, or a home, to log on to the website, to whether you've been there for 6 months or 10 years, you can rate how well you think this building is performing. That can be comfort, that can be quality of public realm, that could be indoor air quality if you've got your own indoor air quality monitor, and obviously it's going to be electric and gas and all the rest. But to bring this into reality, this whole subject, I think we need to speak to residents and building occupiers in their own words. So this is why we need to step outside energy performance and look at design deliverables, whether that's, and that's a very techy term, but look at how the building's performing from the design brief. Have you created a better place? Have you created a better landscape? Do people enjoy it? Is it a beautiful building? Does it get maintained? All these sorts of things. And make it very transparent in this website. You can then, using that data, not only harm and incentivize developers' reputations, but you can also literally tax them if they're not delivering to the performance targets that you've set out, you've benchmarks. You can then use that money to fund the whole website. And you can also, and the whole, and you come up with a much more realistic version of what we've got at the moment in London, which is this esoteric carbon offset tax that no one really knows what's happening. Well, some people do, but not many people know what's happening to that money, so you can make it far more real. The final 2 points are very clearly, no one really knows what people don't know what carbon dioxide is. Let's talk about energy and pounds. Very clear for GLA and policymakers. And scrap VAT on any refurbishment. I think that would very clearly cut retrofit. That's my final thought. Thank you very much.
Bring it home, Bill. I want this to no pressure. All right, the whole workshop rests on this amazing report out. Okay, so let's do this. Look at me. Come on, we're gonna make this happen together, right? You and me. All right, let's do this. Okay.
Okay.
Who you are, your group, and your priorities. Let's go.
Thank you very much. Bill Watts, Max Robbins. Okay, we were talking about decarbonising energy in London. We started off with motherhood and apple pie, saying it's great, we have PVs everywhere, and bring that in. We established the fact there wasn't enough land area in London to collect all the energy we needed, so it might go a bit further afield. But that once we've dealt with the easy stuff, we then got into the sort of more gritty stuff about heat, which is a more difficult thing to sort out, and also the regulatory framework that we're with. Now, a lot of people have shared these issues, but some of the things, a lot of the architects and the consultants within the room have all had to deal with planners who know very little about what they're talking about when it comes to energy and things like that. Now, really they're given a box ticking exercise of saying, has it got CHP? Yeah, you got plenty. And that does not give you flexibility of solutions to promote innovation. So we think that we need more flexibility to provide a good story to deliver energy savings within buildings. It's not so much the decarbonisation of the energy, but it's a way of the buildings doing that. Now, somehow somebody's got to pass that, so perhaps we should have an energy authority, which is a sort of brains trust, to coordinate the supply, demand and finance of energy and gather all the data that is needed for us to make these assessments. Then policing has come up again. It's come up across here. Without policing, without any incentives, people go for the lowest cost option, and that rarely works. So somehow, we haven't got a solution to this, and this is great, what that one is. Then we wanted financial vehicles to allow investment into decarbonisation. There are various ideas that we were copying from other people around the place, including before you can put in new capacity, you've got to prove that it isn't cheaper to take away capacity using megawatts, and that was something that was linked from California. And then the issue of decarbonising the existing building stock is something that we need to get funding for. So that's about it. We had a nice long heated discussion about district heating as well.
A heated discussion about this.
Which we didn't, consensus wasn't achieved on
Just identify the worst performing buildings, take the bottom 20% and make them average. There was so much energy and carbon savings in that bottom 20% that it blew all of their building targets out of the water, right? So it's something we need the data, we need to know who those poor performing buildings are so we can regulate them well. We need better regulation, not more of it. Okay, who's got everybody? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick this one up and restick it. And your next job is, after you've heard all of these excellent pitches, over here somewhere. Everyone's got their, if you follow directions, you should have a line of sticky dots in your pocket. Let's come up here and en masse. There's just gonna be no clean way to do this. This is gonna actually be a free-for-all. Please be cognizant of your space around you. Energy efficiency is polite, let's remember that.
Can you vote for yourself?
You can vote for yourself.
Can you put all 10 on one? You
can put all 10 on one. Bribing is allowed if you want to pay somebody for their dots. I wouldn't. This is just expressing preference, right? So how much? What are you willing to put on the line for your idea? So yeah, everybody we could come up here and put some dots up on this. Actually, you know what? Maybe I want to reorder this, because I think it's going to be madness if we all try to come up here and then get back to there.
I'll go first then, sorry.
How about that?
Just one at a time?
Let's no, not one at a time.
Make it a mess.
Yeah. Let's just go, we're just gonna mess this up. All right, let's do it. All right, get up there and go for the votes. Okay, do it. Thanks everyone for expressing their ideas. It looks like it might be too close to call in terms of our winners here. I mean, we're all winners here today. This is like a children's sports day. There's no losers. But disclosure of energy data is no surprise. We've got that there. A little bit performance-based. Energy targets as well too. Looks popular. Another disclosure to drive reputation, we call that energy data disclosure. Black box is also very, you guys are into sort of salacious spying on people's energy use. I like this. I didn't realize you British were so sneaky. Despite lots of cheers, the text only did moderately well, I would say here. So, and then flexible solutions to promote innovation. So, this is really great, you guys. I mean, just just 2 minutes on reflection, I think that it does seem like we need to, the common theme that binds a lot of this together is data, real-time data that gives us, knowledge on what that performance gap is and how those buildings are actually doing, and then being able to set flexible targets, policies, and incentives based on that data. I mean, that's kind of what I took out of a lot of the feedback here today. Give us a couple thoughts.
Yeah, it's a good one. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I flew in last night from San Francisco to be part of this. I think you should all remember this day, because I think this is quite unusual to bring this many people from such a diverse background, for half a day to talk about how you're going to shape the future of the city that you choose to live and work in. I mean, that's kind of unprecedented in my personal experience. So I just want to actually thank all of you for coming and spending the time, and really look forward to seeing the result of everybody's efforts. So thank you.
So I'm Maureen from the energy team, currently in the midst of writing London plan policy at the moment, so this is very good timing for that. I stayed on table 1, just on new developments. That's kind of seemed most fruitful for me, because that's the policy I have to write. So yeah, it's great to get all the ideas from the team there. I think what was encouraging is that I think we all kind of agreed on what the issues are, and generally about what the kind of key areas we need to do to really focus on and to tackle some of these issues, in particular in terms of enforcement and monitoring and data. That's something I've been kind of scratching my head around over the last few months, so it's kind of good to know that others are too, and to really talk through that. So that was really helpful. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing the outputs. I think it'll be really helpful for the wider team as well, and the rest of the London plan policy. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, for being here today, so thank you very much for coming and doing your civic duty. We know that nobody makes any money coming to one of these things and volunteering their time, so you're all obviously deeply passionate people who care about the future, and so I think when I was struck by Clara's 3.7 years where we have to take action, right? And there's I think if you've been to a sustainability conference, you've probably heard this quote before, but there's like a Swahili saying which says, and I'm not Swahili before you ask, just in case you're wondering, but it's that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And so we have to go a long way together fast, and with that takes leadership, right? And it takes a shared vision and a collective voice, and I think it's heartening to see all of that happen here today and just in front of us. So give yourselves a giant hand. So great work, everybody. And what we'd like